Okay, so today we are going to start one of actually your most important topic in the programming, that is object-oriented concepts, right? Object-oriented programming in Java. So we have been discussing the structured programming, and actually we have completed the structured programming starting from variables to operators, methods, and of course control structures. So today we are going to discuss uh, object-oriented programming. So as you know, there are two ways of programming: structured programming and object-oriented programming. So structured programming is good when the problem is simple. We just want to have a quick solution, right? So structured programming is okay. But when the problem is complex, and also we are interested about reusability, maintainability, right? So we need to go for object-oriented programming. Especially if you are using a framework or something, again you have to go for object-oriented because you are basically extending the framework. Okay. So therefore, for serious situations, most of the time we go for object oriented. Actually, when we take real world software development, uh, about more than 80% of software is developed. Actually, it's getting higher and higher. Percentage is getting higher and higher. Actually, if you take current development, about more than 90% of software development is object oriented, whereas only small part is structured programming. Okay, right. So therefore it's very important to understand these things, especially if you want to move on to industry as a say software develop software engineer later on, like Java software engineer, .NET software engineer. Definitely, unless you know object oriented concepts, you are not going to be getting the job, and you can't survive basically. Okay. But if of course if you just want to be a web developer, right, web designer, you may be able to survive. But still now, when more object oriented frameworks are used in the backend. Okay, so therefore it's very important. And again, this is not as straightforward as structured programming, right? So structured programming is very easy to understand relatively, whereas object oriented programming, it will take some time to understand. Okay, so at first you might feel like I have understood, but later again you will find that okay, I am not very confident about this. So that is the nature of it. Therefore, so you have to pay a lot of attention, think over and over, do some coding, then only you will be a very good object oriented programmer. Okay, so that is very important thing. It will take some time to get things into your mind, not only mind, to basically to understand. Okay, right. So let's start. So I hope you got the big picture, right? So let's see how object oriented programming works. So it is not just object oriented programming. Basically what happens is you have to start with object oriented analysis, then object oriented design, then you will move on to the object oriented programming, right? So object oriented analysis, so entire process we have to think in terms of objects, right? Not only programming, right? When gathering requirements and modeling requirements, you have to think using object oriented concepts. When designing, object oriented concepts. And of course when you are programming, object or using the object oriented concept. So that is why later on you have a subject called object oriented system analysis and design, right? Because you have to do the analysis and design using these concepts. Okay, right. Right, so let's see what are the so let's first try to understand what is this object oriented concepts is. In object orientation, what we think of a system is, remember, in structured programming, we when we are doing a developing a solution, what we think is, we think that we want to process data into information, right? So process data, process data into information, right? So that is a very straightforward, very simple approach. That is why we learn here about anyway we have done this, variables, right? Simple variables, composite variables like arrays. Here we discuss about operations, control structures and methods. So you can see using these we are doing some processing to get the output. So that is okay for simple applications, right? But when it comes to complex applications like order processing systems, payroll systems, sometimes entire ERP system of a business, right? So this approach will work, but there is a better approach, that is object-oriented approach. Okay. So in object-oriented approach, we don't think like this. So this thinking is very easy, right? But the only thing is our solution is not going to be a maintainable, reusable, long-term solution, right? So solution is not going for long-term uh, use, right? But in object orientation, what we think, how we think is, we think of a system as a set of objects interact, right? Interact. So there can be sometimes two-way interactions also. So basically, we think of a system like this. So okay, so there can be some other objects also. This is how you model or think this about the system. It can be order processing system, it can be payroll management system, or it can be entire ERP system, right? Reservation system. But whatever the system, when we are developing something using object-oriented concepts, we have to think like this. So our system is set of objects interacting with each other, so that results in some useful functionalities. Right, so little bit complex at the right at the beginning. Sometimes you may feel like this is little bit unnatural, but once you become familiar with the concepts, you will feel like okay, this is also very natural approach. Okay, so these are the objects, right? Objects. So objects. So these are called messaging. Right? Message. Right? So we use few terms. Set of objects communicate and collaborate. Right. Right. When it comes to object orientation, we can think of object oriented programming as something like this. That is, I'll draw it somewhere here. So we can think of object oriented system or when we are doing some thinking in terms of object orientation, we can think it like this. So here we have object oriented basics. So this is just a way of thinking object oriented basics, right? Then we have object oriented concepts, right? Object oriented concepts. Then on top of that we have some advanced object oriented concepts, right? Advanced concepts, basically those are general concepts. So as software developers, if you want to do some software development using object oriented concepts or object oriented way, first you have to learn this object oriented basics, right? Basics. Then on top of that you will be learning object oriented concepts, right? Once you are familiar with that and you have some experience, you can move on to advanced concepts, right? So in our syllabus, in our programming one subject, we are going to cover this basics first. So that is why you have two PDFs, right? So you have two PDFs, PDF 9, that is object oriented OOP with Java basics. So we are going to cover uh, that, right? So basic idea, because this is a very complicated thing, remember. So I'm keep on telling, object orientation is a very complex things, right? It's relatively complex things. So a lot of students find it very difficult to understand also, right? You might feel like you have understood, but when it comes to apply that knowledge and start building a software, you are going to struggle unless it is perfectly sort of understood. Okay, so so the first PDF is cover this one. Then we will move on to object oriented concepts in the second session. So that is why I want to separate it into two sessions also. I need you to have some time, think about these things before moving to the second session. So therefore I just break it into two sessions also, right? So in the second session we will be discussing concepts, right? So here we will be discussing concepts like what is class, what is object, what is methods, what are the things inside class. So those things we will discuss here. So in the next session we will discuss object oriented concepts. So basically there are four concepts: abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So we will be discussing those in the next session, right? Then there are some advanced concepts, right? So those things we are not going to discuss. So because you need little bit more exposure to start understanding these things. So that is where you have things like design patterns and other advanced concepts. So those things most of the time you learn when you go to the industry. While you are having your career in your software developer or whatever, you will gradually learn these concepts because you need little bit of experience to understand these, right? So that is why you know that when it comes to engineering and not, actually you don't have that opportunity when it comes to IT also. After second year, right, most of the time what happens is they send the students to industry for training, right? So that is a must in engineering, right? Now it is sort of a norm in software engineering also. So they go to the industry, have some training about 6 months, then they come back to the university and start doing their final year. So one of the reason is you need some practical exposure to understand the next level of high level advanced concepts. So basically these are advanced concepts, so we are not going to cover these things. You will self learn those things while you are working, right? While you are working in the industry you will learn these things, right? Like design patterns. Actually if you want you can start learning these things right now, right? If you are very confident about these things, if you are not struggling, yes you can, before moving to the industry also you can start learning. But to master it you need practical exposure, okay, right? So today we are going to cover only object oriented basics, okay, right? So I hope you got the big picture. So this is serious stuff, right? This is serious stuff we are going to discuss. So at any time if you have any questions you can ask, right? Because I know this is fairly complicated topic, okay, right? So this is how we understand an object system when we are looking think in terms of object orientation. So we have set of objects. This set of objects can pass messages uh, to other objects, okay. So that is how we look at it. So as I told you, we think understand object orientation like this: object oriented basics, object oriented concepts, and advanced object oriented concepts, okay. So today we are going to cover only basics. So when it comes to object oriented basics, so these are the two concepts we will be discussing: object, and of course the related concept called class and messaging, right? So today we are going to discuss only this. Then in the next session, we will be discussing the concept of abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Okay, so those are the four concepts that we are going to discuss under object-oriented concepts. Then there are some advanced concepts you will learn. Of course, you can start learning if you have the confidence after the two sessions. Unless otherwise, you have to start your project. Right? Actually, when you start your project, you will start learning these concepts, especially uh, if you are planning to do your project using a serious object oriented concepts, right? Like if you are going to do it with Java or C Sharp, you need these concepts. You will pick up some of these concepts, right? And also if you start doing with some object oriented frameworks is using PHP also, you will pick up those things. Actually if you are not very confident about these things, you are not going to do any object oriented programming, and of course you are not going to start your project using object orientation also, right? Because you know you will feel like I am not confident enough to develop some serious systems, right? So those who have the confidence will start applying the object-oriented concepts into the development. Okay, right. So what are the advantages? As I told you, it's more reusable code, more maintainable code, and of course, this is very natural way of thinking, right? So thinking of a system as set of objects communicating and collaborating is a very natural way of system rather than just thinking, yes, this is data is going to be processed. So that is very narrow-minded way, though it is very easy to think like that. The realistic approach, the holistic approach is, or the more natural approach is, think of a system as a set of objects communicating and collaborating by passing messages. So that is more natural approach, right? For example, say you came to the our institute to register for a class. So basically, what you are, so in object oriented ways, you are also considered as object. So you are a sort of a client object. Then you will talk with a receptionist object, right? So receptionist object will give you a application object. Likewise, so there will be a registration object created. Then there will be payment objects. So likewise, everything is object, right? So you will be discussing about class objects, right? Course objects, right? So all those things are, we consider it as object. So that is a, at first you might feel like sort of a unease, but later on you will feel that okay, that is also not a big thing. Okay, right. So what are the advantages? So and when to use? Uh, when the system is complex, when you are interested about long-term maintainability, and also if you want to extend a framework. So the moment you say you are using framework in programming, right? I'm not talking about frameworks like the bootstrap where you use for HTML, CSS, right? So when we say frameworks for programming, like, so there are some frameworks like struts framework, spring framework for java, then code igniter, laravel for php. So if you are going to use these frameworks, obviously you are going to use object oriented concepts. Okay, so if you want to do those things later on, learn object orientation very well, right? Right. So as I told you, it is not just in programming we think in terms of objects. No, it start from the analysis, right? So object-oriented analysis, object-oriented design, object-oriented programming, right? So when you are doing the in next semester, you will be doing some system analysis and design. There we will subdivide it into two, right? Subdivide it into two: structured system analysis and design, structured system analysis and design, object oriented system analysis and design. So if you are planning to develop your system using structured way, structured programming, you what you do is structured system analysis and design. There you will be learning a lot of at the initial you will be drawing some context diagrams, data flow diagrams, right? Data flow diagrams, then some more diagrams. Then you will be moving to the maybe composite, something like top-down approach. So you can create some modules, sub-modules. We discuss those things, right? The cohesion, coupling, right? So top-down. So that is the approach for structured programming, right? So you do structured system analysis and design, analyze the system using structured approach like data flow diagrams, context diagrams, and of course the ER diagrams. Then do the designing in a modular way. So this is called modular decomposition because we have the concept of method here, right? And no, there is no concept of object. So we do the modular decomposition. Then each modules, when it is manageable, we will either draw flowcharts or pseudocode, then convert it to code, right? So that is the approach in structured system analysis and design. But when it comes to object-oriented SAD that you will be learning in your next semester, we will be discussing about class diagrams, right? Class diagrams. Then, sorry, first we will be discussing about use case diagrams for analysis, then class diagrams, sequence diagrams, right? So likewise, it's a different set of modeling, different set of that modeling. So we are not talking about data flow diagrams. So modular decomposition diagrams, etc. Rather, we will be discussing use case diagrams, class diagrams, right? sequence diagrams, communication and collaboration diagrams. So that is we think in terms of object orientation, right? Think in terms of object orientation, right? Right. So anyway, we will be touching the class diagrams from next week when we learn inheritance, polymorphism, etc. Right. So as I told you, so today we are going to discuss only object-oriented basics, right? So not the concepts or advanced concepts. So the two concepts are objects or class and message, right? Object or class and message, right? So why it is important? We think of a system as, right? We think of a system as a set of objects, right? Set of objects communicating and collaborating, right? Communicating and collaborating. So obviously, so we have the objects, we have concept called message, right? So object and class are two concepts but highly related, therefore we have taken it together, right? Because they are, but remember, object and class are two different concepts but highly related, therefore we take it as together, but remember those are two concepts. Okay, so object and class are highly related, two different concepts. Okay, right. So let's start with what is mean by object. Okay, what is mean by object? So in object oriented programming, anything which is part of the system is considered an object, right? Anything, right? So that is something you have to understand. Anything which is part of the system, or anything that we are interested, anything which are important, right? For our information system or our system modeling is called object. So basically anything means, we have not mentioned everything, because anything which is part of the system or anything which is important for the system is called object. So that is the difficult thing when it comes to object orientation and beginning as a beginner, because everything you have to think it as objects if it is related to the system. Okay, so let's try to understand that, right? Let's try to understand what does it mean. So we can just subdivide to help us understand what is this concept of object is. So basically object can be a living thing, right? For example, if you are talking about a customer, employee, remember we have to work with these concepts when it comes to developing a system, right? If it's a payroll system, the payroll system will calculate salary of employees, right? If it is order processing system, there will be customers, right? Custom order payments are done by customers, right? Then of course, if you are developing a reservation system, the customers will do some reservations, right? So therefore, our system will have concept called or objects which are human, so living things, right? So when we say living things, mostly humans, because we are not going to make systems for cats and dogs, right? But there can be situation like also if it is a vet clinic or something, right? Of course the cat won't come and do the registration, right? But cat will be a patient, right? So that is possible, right? So living things will be there in a object oriented designing, analysis, design and development. So some of these objects will be living things, right? Second, we have the physical things, right? So it can be a product, machine, vehicle, right? So if it is order processing system, so the products will have some goods. So goods are physical things. So goods are also objects in our analysis and design. Okay, right. Then so the third one is the most important things and most difficult thing for some people to understand. Some of these objects can be even conceptual things, right? So both living things and physical things are physical, but only thing is living things are have the life. Of course, the living things are also physical, but conceptual things means those are not physical things. You can't touch; they are not tangible, right? But conceptually, there is something like that, right? For example. If you come to the institute, you will be talking about course. So I want to enroll for this particular course. So uh, course is a uh, concept, right? Course is a concept, right? If you go to the bank, you want to open a account. So account is a concept, right? So you want to make an order, you want to do a payment. So all those things are even something like reservation, right? So all of those are conceptual. Of course, there will be some physical thing to represent that, right? For example, if you go to the bank and open a account, so most probably you will give they so basically what you have started is open is a conceptual thing called account, but to represent that, right, to help make you happy also, they will give you a small physical thing to represent that conceptual thing. So what is the physical thing that they give you? Right, they will give you a account book, right? So passport kila den account book, or they will just now these days they will just give you the ATM card, right? So ATM card is not your account is a conceptual thing. So ATM card is another actually object for our system that is related to account. So we have ATM card uh, object which is a physical object, whereas your account is a conceptual object, right? So when you make a payment, payment is a concept, right? But to represent that payment, you might get a payment voucher, right? Payment slip. So that is a physical representation of that payment, the concept of payment. But payment itself is a conceptual thing, right? So order, course, all those things are conceptual things. So when you are developing software, we will be creating payment class, course class, order class, because we want to model that also, right? Conceptual things also, not just we will be having customer class, uh, student class, or physical things like goods or vehicle or whatever. No, we will be modeling these things, and we will be having these type of classes as well. Okay, right. So I'm doing little bit slower, actually very slowly, because this is not a revision. This is regular class, right? Because of these issues, we may not be able to do these classes. We may not be able to do in our physical environment because there will be some restriction for maybe another 2 weeks. So therefore, I'm doing it as a regular class now. So this is not a revision, right? Previously, we just did the revision. So therefore, if you have any questions, make sure you ask. Okay, so when it comes to classes and objects, right? So especially when still we are discussing about the objects, we are interested about two things of each and every object, right? So two things, that is attributes, properties, or states. So same thing, right? So three different words. Actually, there are small differences, but you can consider it as the same thing we are representing, like these terms, right? So if when it comes to object, we are interested about two things of that object: attributes and behaviors. Attributes and behaviors. Another name for attribute is properties, and of course states are also part of properties or attributes. Behaviors or services, right? So those are the things that we are interested when it comes to object, right? For example, if it is if say a banking system, if you take a customer, right? Customer, so there are some properties we are interested, there are some behaviors we are interested. So when we say we are interested for our system, right? Maybe our system is a banking system, right? So that manage all the accounts, transactions, etc. So what are the properties that we are interested about this customer? Of course, we are interested about his name, right? His contact number, right? So that is why they will give you a form, right? They will give you a form and ask you to fill those things, right? Because they need that, right? Name, contact number, and of course now you can start your account online also, but still there will be a web form for you to fill out these things, right? Name, contact number, maybe your ID card number. So those are properties or attributes, right, of the object that we are interested, right? For example, uh, we are not interested about your color or your height, right? What you are wearing. So those are also properties, but we are not interested. So what we are interested is those minimal things. So that is what is known as abstraction. We will discuss those things later. So abstraction means basically we model the minimum required things for the system, right? So we are not interested about your height or whatever, your skin color, because we are not going to create a matchmaking site. Of course, if you are going to create a matchmaking site, right, right? Again, online matchmaking sites, yes, then we will ask those things also, right? Your height, your weight, right? Because we are going to do a matching. But for accounting systems, as abstraction or banking system, we are only interested about these things, right? So similarly, if it is a physical things like vehicle, we will be interested about the vehicle number, right? The vehicle type, right? So those are attributes, right? Then the second category is the behaviors, right? So we are interested about behaviors also. So these are attributes. Say customer for a bank. So what are the behaviors we are interested? Of course, we don't interested about your behavior of laughing, talking. That is out of our interest, right? Because our system is all about your bank accounts, managing your accounts. So what are the behaviors that we are interested? So basically, we are interested about actually bank ඔයාගේ වැඩිම මාස behavior මොකද්ද? කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන්? What is the most interesting behavior that the bank about you, your the bank customers? Can someone tell me? So I give you some time to think. Can someone tell me what is the most important behavior for bank on a customer? So you can make mistakes. There is no right and wrong answer. Can someone tell me if you are shy to talk? Some people are shy to talk. Put it into WhatsApp group, not to the this chat, because I have to move into the tab. I can see the chat in my phone. Therefore, so the most important behavior for the bank is what? Deposit. Right. ඕගොල්ලෝ සල්ලි දාන හන්දනේ බැංකුව තියෙන්නේ. Deposit. So we want to model the deposit behavior of a customer for a bank. Then withdraw. Right. Withdraw. සල්ලි ගන්නවා. So you can see we are not interested in about how you walk, how you speak, your laughing behavior, but bank is interested about deposit, withdraw, right? So those kind of things. Maybe you want to make some payments or bank transfers, right? So those are the behaviors that we are interested. So you have to start thinking like that gradually, right? So I know that it will take some time, right? So you have to think about it, right? Because it's a new way of thinking, right? If someone is doing so serious software development somewhere anywhere in the world right now, his thinking is like this, right? His thinking is like this because, as I told you, 90% of the time we develop software using object oriented concepts, right? So deposit, withdraw, so those are the behaviors that we are interested for the customer, right? uh, Actually we will be transfer these concepts into later, though you feel like these are the behaviors of customer, later we will see that actually these are not behaviors of the customer, these are behaviors of the account, right? Actually these are the behaviors of account. So we will transfer most of the behaviors of the customer into uh, the object of account rather than the customer. So that is something you have to understand. So a lot of students struggle at beginning also. They will think that all those, so actually what happens is they tend to not to consider these conceptual objects, right? Conceptual objects like account, course, reservation, etc. Rather they will start thinking all those things are done by the customer or student or whatever, right? But gradually you have to think that okay, these behaviors are done by the customer, but actually these are the behaviors of this particular conceptual thing. So actually, though I wrote these things initially as the customer is doing, actually what happens is later we will not model any of these things to the customer. We will be modeling all those things to a conceptual uh, object called account in this case, right? Actually these attributes are going to be retained by the customer, right? Actually these behaviors are going to be part of the account class, not the customer. Then we will say okay, deposit is a behavior of a account. Withdraw is a behavior of an account, right? And of course, this account class will have its own attributes also. Obviously, now it's easier for you to think of these attributes, right? Account for bank පොතේ තියෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඔයාගේ ATM card එකේ සමහරවිට තියෙනවා මේවා, right? So for example, account number, right? Account number, right? Account type, of course the balance, right? So balance is the most important attribute in account object, right? So that is what you are really interested about. So those are attributes of the account class, and obviously after some time you will learn that okay, deposit and withdraw are really the behaviors of account, right? So sometimes it's very difficult for you to understand because a concept concept එකක් කොහොමද behaviors පෙන්නන්නේ. concept එකක් කියන්නේ concept එකක්. ඔව් හැබැයි ඔයාලට හිතන්න වෙනවා ටිකක් හරි ගියාට පස්සේ මේ අර account මේ concept එකටත් එහෙම behaviors තියෙනවා කියලා, right? So deposit is a behavior of an account, withdraw is a behavior of an account, right? Of course the customer class will also can have those behaviors, but what happens is when the customer object show that behavior, basically you are sending a message to the account object to show that behavior, right? For example, you go to the ATM machine and you want to withdraw some money, right? So what happens is initially, yes, customer is showing that behavior, but the moment you enter your amount and say withdraw, now it has to be happened in your server, right? Your system. There the account class or the account object will show that deposit or withdraw behavior. That is how its balance is going to be reduced. So then now we can see how the message passing goes. First the customer showed that withdraw behavior, then you send a message to the account object to do the withdraw behavior for your instance of account, your account object. Actually the customer is doing that by interacting with the user interface. From that user interface there will be message sent to the server to do this withdraw. That means you are sending a message to your relevant account object to do this withdraw behavior, right? Withdraw behavior. So it's very interesting thing, right? So though it looks like complicated, it's a very interesting way you develop your object oriented systems, right? Though it will take a little bit of time. So yes, it will take time. That is why you have a lot of other supplementary subjects, right? Because this is not the end of your software development, right? This is still you are in the semester 1 programming 1 subject. You will be learning programming 2, other web development concepts, other software engineering, object oriented analysis, right? So that when all the things are fitting together, you must be able to, or you will get that confidence. I don't know whether you get that confidence or no. If you do this in a proper way, right? With good attitude, right? Positive attitude of I want to build some system in the future, I want to serve the society, I want to serve my organization by doing a lot of IT related things, you will learn those things. But if not, at the end of your final year also, you will find that okay, though I don't have all those things fit into my mind, right? So that is why I keep on telling, understand these things, think about these things little bit seriously, okay, right? So in order to understand these things further, you will be learning some other modeling things, like you will be learning class diagrams, right? Right, so class diagrams like this, right? So that is to help you further understand these things, right? Then you will be learning some sequence diagrams in your next semester, right? Where how the message passing is done, right? How the message passing is done. Message passed to this, for this, it will return something, and of course it can send another message to this, right? Likewise, so you will be learning these sequence diagrams, class diagrams, then communication and collaboration diagrams to further understand how these things are happening, right? So as I told you, you enter your ATM card, so that is the we have model U, then you have the UI object, right? Then you are entering those things and submit, say withdraw, then there is a message sent to in the server to your account class to do the withdraw. Then the account class is not going to just blindly do the withdraw, it will have to do some validations at the background, check whether you have the authority to do that, whether you have enough balance. So it has to call some other objects also. Then those objects will return you some results, right? They might throw some exceptions, so they might say, okay, that is also fine. Then you have to sometimes call another one, right? For example, the moment you do your withdraw, right? So sometimes, of course, your database has to be updated. Maybe the database updation is done by another object, right? So we will discuss those things like different type of objects like persistence, control objects, persistence objects, uh, interface objects in your next semesters, right? Then of course, say assume that you want the moment you do a withdraw, there will be a there will be a SMS notification. Then that object has to send another message to the email utility class to generate the or email or the SMS utility class to generate the SMS. So that is why the moment you do your withdraw, you get a SMS message saying there is a withdraw for your account, right? So you can see it's so that is how these things are modeled. That is how these things are modeled. So if you want to do these kind of serious things, right, or at least if you want to be a part of the team member of people who are doing these serious things, you have to learn object oriented concepts well, because as I told you, 90% of the software, serious software, is developed using these concepts, right? These concepts. So we want to understand how things are happening. So here we are just making you the foundation. In your next semesters, we will be learning more and more about class diagrams, sequence diagrams, right? Then you have the programming 2, that is the data structures and algorithms. You will learn more and more things like different data structures and stuff like that. But this is the beginning of the journey, right? So some people will like it, some people will hate it, right? So those who like to think, those who like to develop things, those who like to build something and uh, be happy about that, saying that I did complex things, I come up with a perfect solution, my system is now going to be used by a lot of people. Yes, you are going to learn these things. But if always the concept of exams come to your mind, right? Make exam එකට එයිද, මේකෙන් MCQ එකක් එයිද, හරි, මට exam එක pass වෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙයිද, then you are not going to learn these things, right? Definitely. So you will be ended up with a BIT degree, but not with any of these competencies, because you have terrible attitude problem. Actually, you have mental problem, the exam syndrome, right? Exam syndrome or whatever, exam phobia, right? So when you have the exam phobia, you are not going to do anything, right? So forget about the exams, learn these things because you want to do something useful to the society, right? Okay, so have that mindset, right? So as I told you, object have the attributes and behavior. So actually we are interested about the attributes and behaviors because those two are going to be important for the rest of the functionalities of the system, whether it's a account, banking systems or reservation systems or whatever, right? So what we discussed so far is object, right? Object is anything that we are interested. It can be living thing, physical thing, or conceptual thing, right? And we are interested about when it comes to object, we are interested about two things, that those are attributes and behaviors, right? So right now we are going to discuss about classes, right? As I told you, there are two main concepts, objects and classes versus messages. Though we have taken separate together, these there are some distinctions, but highly related. But now we have taken it as a separate thing, class, right? So what is class, right? So if I ask from some student what is mean by class, 99% of the people don't know what is class, right? Or they just throw some words, right? Some garbage terms without any meaning, right? Any serious meaning. So what is a class? So let's go to the definition. A class models, right? So that's very important term. Class models, right, or represent set of similar objects, right? So a class is something that we want to, or we use to model or represent set of similar objects, right? uh, and also class, the concept of class facilitates or act as a factory or blueprint to make objects. So those are the two important portions of the definition, right? Class models set of similar objects, and later on it act as a factory or blueprint to make objects. So those are the two important things. So your definition must have those things. So always you must have those 2 points in your mind if you want to understand what is meant by class, right? Right. So let's try to understand why we need the concept of class. So as I told you, when it comes to object orientation, we think of system as a set of a lot of objects communicating and collaborating with each other by passing messages, right? So there can be so many custom objects, so many custom objects. There can be so many account objects, right? There can be so many payment objects, right? There can be so many loan objects, right? ඔයා ගත්තොත් එහෙම බැංකුවකට ගියොත් එහෙම මේ වෙලාවේ ATM machine වලින් එක එක කෙනා එක එක accounts එක වැඩ කරනවා. මේ වෙලාවේ කිහිප දෙනෙක් loan transactions කරනවා. හැබැයි අපිට මේ ඔක්කොම බැංකුවක් ගත්තොත් branches උත් තියෙනවා නේද? So there can be hundreds of branches, right? Maybe thousands of, maybe 10,000, maybe millions of accounts in a bank, right? So we don't want to model each and every account. We don't want to model each and every customer. We don't want to model each and every payment because it's huge, right? Volume wise, in a particular second, there can be thousands of payment happening. So therefore, what we want to do is forget about, or actually not forgetting, rather than think in terms of objects, because there can be hundreds and thousands of objects interacting at a particular moment. What we do is to model all these account objects, right? We model a account class, right, to represent or to model each and every customer. What we come up with is a customer class, right? If it is payroll system, to model each and every employee, say payroll system or the attendance management system, to model each and every employee, we create an employee class, right? So now I hope you got the idea. Yes, in reality, objects are doing all the things, so communication, collaborations. But when it comes to software development using object-oriented concept, we are not going to model object because there are hundreds and thousands of objects there. What we do is to represent all the similar objects, say all the accounts, we are going to have an account class. To model each and every or all the employee objects, we are going to have an employee class, right? Now again look at the definition. Class models or represent set of similar objects, right? So similar objects, right? So class is not going to represent all the objects, similar objects. All the account objects will be represented by account class. All the custom objects are modeled by the customer class, right? Then later on you will learn that using a class we can create objects, right? Because in reality what all those the functionalities are happening by at object level, not class level. So why we want to model class? Every object oriented programming language facilitate you to create objects out of the class. So that is why we use this term, class act like a factory or blueprint. Blueprint එක කියන්නේ seal එකක් කියන එක. අපි දන්නවා seal එකෙන් අපිට ඒ seal එක ගගහ යන්න පුළුවන්. So then අර seal එකේ instance වලට අපි කියන්නේ objects කියලා. So the better term is basically factory. So the factory can keep on producing that particular objects, right? Okay, so that is how you understand the class, right? Class. So though objects are interacting in the reality, when we are doing some programming, we will be having classes. Of course, we will be having objects also, but first we will be modeling the class, right? And because objects or class represents set of similar objects, obviously the class is also going to have the same two concepts, attributes and behaviors, because basically class models set of similar objects. Therefore, when we want to model a class, we will be modeling the attributes and behaviors of that specific objects. Okay, so the attributes and behaviors of the objects will be same as the attributes and properties. Attributes and behaviors of the objects and attributes and behaviors of the corresponding class will be the same, right? Corresponding class will be the same, right? So that is the basic idea behind the first idea of basics object to class. So, when we say object to class, two different, highly related. Now the next thing is messaging. Right? So as I told you, it is messaging that make our system live or make our system dynamic, make our system do something, right? So that is why I keep on asking some questions, right? So I know these modeling concepts, right? Now I am keep on talking. You guys are keep on silent. That means we are not a dynamic system, right? So we are not a dynamic system. I am as object showing lot of behaviors. You as objects not showing any behaviors. There is no message passing, right? So that is why I keep on asking you to communicate, right? But I don't know. So you guys have a lot of issues, communication issues, right? Therefore you don't talk, right? Otherwise, we are going to be a very good object-oriented system. Actually, we are not a very good object-oriented system. We are a sort of dead system. Anyway, I will be doing this, right? uh, because uh, because online, so you are not much familiar with the online learning system yet, right? So messaging is one object calling the behavior of another object, so that is called messaging, right? So remember, your employee, your customer will have some behaviors, and of course the account will have some behaviors. Your customer can call behavior of an account, so that is messaging. That is messaging. So don't worry about this term. This is little bit old-fashioned term, the word message, but it make basically message means object calling behavior of another object. Okay, object call behavior of another object is called messaging, right? So that we will be using when it comes to programming, right? Object oriented programming, right? Okay, so this is just an example. Anyway, we'll be creating those classes later. So here we have made a class to represent all the objects of A. So we have called it class A. To represent all the object of type B, we have made a class called class B, right? Then what we can do is, if needed, class A can create object of class B. Now you can see this is your class B is acting as a factory, right? Because now from this class B, I have created a class B type object, right? So we call it just simple B for the time being. Then class A is now showing a behavior, right? Showing a behavior. So while it is showing that behavior, it can refer to that object B and call the behavior of class B, which is the behavior Q, right? Now this is a class. Now you can see it has created a class, object of another class. And now the class A is showing some behavior. As part of showing that behavior, it is calling the behavior of the class B object, right? B object. So now you can see that is message passing. That is message passing, and of course we have another class here, which is the main class. It has the main method, which is creating object of class A, right? So this is object of class A, and it is calling the behavior of class A. So when it calls the behavior of class A, which is the behavior P, it is referring to the object of class B and it is calling that behavior. Now you can see that now you must get that big picture of this object or demo object sending a message to class A object to show the behavior P, right? Then it is calling the class B object to show the behavior Q, because it has to be shown, behavior Q has to be invoked, otherwise this guy's task is not going to be done, right? So that is how you think, right? So that is how you think. So what you have to do is you have to look at those designing artifacts and code together and look at it. So that is why I asked some of our semester 3 students also to join here, because now they have done this object oriented system analysis and design, right? Of course the semester 1 student, still they haven't done this object oriented system analysis and design part. They are only learning the programming, but now after doing this system analysis and design subject, now semester 3 students are in a better position to understand all these things as a whole, right? So that is why I asked them also to join this particular session to now you are in a next level. Of course, the semester 1 students are still in this level. Semester 3 students are in the next level, so they are now looking at the same subject from above, right? So semester 1 student, they are just looking at from here the subject. Semester 3 students are looking at from above because they have already done these all these class diagrams, sequence diagrams, etc., right? So it's a good thing. So I ask all of you to join this session. So that is the beauty of doing classes in virtual environment. So we have a lot of freedom to attend different classes. Otherwise, semester 3 students will be in one room, semester 1 student will be in another room. So we can't make them into one, right? So now it's so they are looking at these things in a different way, more holistic way. Semester 1 student, of course, you will move to semester 3, right, later on. Then you will have a better understanding of these things. But if you can understand here itself, that is really good, right? That is really good, right? Now also you can see that a lot of semester 3 students have joined this session. That is why they know the importance of this topic. Okay, and also I asked some of project students also, they know the importance of understanding this, because it will boost their confidence to do some real world software development. Okay, right. So gradually you will understand, especially semester 1 student will gradually understand. Of course, the semester 3 student will straight away understand what is this code is. Okay, semester 3 and project students. Semester 1 students still we haven't do this coding. So anyway we will be coding this. Okay, so I'm going very slowly because this is the basics. So once you have the basic or the foundation, you can actually you can self learn, right? But without the foundation you can't self learn, right? Right. So these diagrams you will be learning in your next semesters. Actually, we will be learning some class diagrams today itself, but I want to relate these things, right? So you can see this is a class diagram where demo class is associated with class A is associated with class B, right? So there can be some other classes also. Uh, if there is no association, that means that class cannot invoke behavior of that class. Okay, and also this is a sequence diagram showing the messaging. So you can say demo class, or the object of demo class is sending a message to the object of class A to show the behavior P. Then that object of class A is sending a message to the instance of class B to show the behavior Q, right? Because that is needed to do this behavior, right? Then it will return saying, okay, I'm done. Then this will return saying, I'm done, right? So that is how it works. So basically this diagram is sequence diagram that you will learn in your semester 3 that represent this particular code, right? This particular code. Actually what happens is you will first design these things, right? Design these things, then you will be coding. That is how the reality is, right? But what I explain is, first I showed you the code that we are going to write later, then how it is modeled, right? So actually that is how we are learning. Also in semester 1 you are learning this coding, right? Coding. In semester 2 and 3 you are learning how to model, because we can't start with modeling and do the coding. We have to start with coding and later learn the modeling, right? So when you, because we have not still learned the modeling, there will be small gaps. So when you go into semester 2 and 3, those gaps will be filled, and all of a sudden it's going to start the make sense. The entire things are going to start make sense. Okay, but there can be small gaps for semester 1 students. Okay, that is natural because modeling is done in your semester 2 3. Okay, so let's see. Now we know that we have the concept of objects, and of course the corresponding concept of class. Then the concept of messaging. Messaging is just one object creating a behavior of another object, because that is needed to get the things done. That communication and collaboration is needed, right? Now let's see the structure of a class, right? So this is a very simple class, actually not a very simple class, fairly feature rich class. So you start a class with whatever the public term you forget about for the time being. So just we call it class account. So that is the name of the class, right? Then your class can have these things like instance variables, class variables, constructor, instance methods, class methods. So those are the things that can be there in a class. So we are going to take one by one. So that is how a class looks. Now you can see there is no main method, right? So we have been ඇත්තටම මෙච්චර කරේ මොකද්ද structured programming කියලා class එකේ ඔය main method එකට කොටු වෙලා හිටියේ සහ පොඩි methods ටිකක් අපි ලිව්වා කලින් class එකේ දැන් අපි මේක බොහොම freely use කරන්නයි හදන්නේ object oriented වලට ගියාම so entire thing is going to be our playground right earlier we were confined to these small places now entire class is going to be our playground because Java is object oriented programming right, language it has supported all these features okay right so anyway we will be discussing these things right so then once you have a class like this right once you have class like this now you can see it has modeled some attributes so these are some attributes balance attributes right account number attribute interest rate attributes right so it has modeled the attributes and it has modeled some behaviors right deposit behavior withdraw behavior add interest behavior so that is another very important behavior that you are interested about your account right at the end of the month you want your account to be updated with interest so that is also behavior of a account right so okay you might think like it's a behavior of the bank but when it comes to object oriented modeling you have to think that it's a behavior of the account so that is the most important and the most difficult part initially right so you might think okay it's a behavior of bank yes but when it comes to object oriented modeling it's a behavior of the account so after sometimes with some experience you will start pick it right අර language එකක් ඉගෙන ගන්නවා වගේ bicycle පදින්න ඉගෙන ගන්නවා වගේ මේක ටිකක් වෙලා යනකොට ඇඟට වදිනවා ඇඟට වැදුනට පස්සේ ඔයාලා ගන්නට මේ behaviors මොන object එකද කියලා තේරෙන්න පටන් ගන්නවා right but it needs lot of experience practice and coding okay so as I told you why we need a class remember the definition of class so these words are very precisely selected words okay අර surgeon කෙනෙක් surgery එකක් කරනකොට එයා කොච්චර seriously හිතලාද ඒක surgery එක කරන්නේ so as a teacher right so when you are preparing your student notes we are just like surgeons right so we think about each and every terms and so අනවශ්‍ය කිසිම දෙයක් ඔකට දාන්නේ නැහැ surgery එක කරද්දී අඟලක්වත් වැඩියෙන් කපන්නේ නැහැ වගේ තමයි ඔය notes වල වචනයක්වත් අනවශ්‍ය වචන දාලා නැහැ අනිත් අතට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වචනයක්වත් අඩු කරලත් නැහැ හරි so these notes are like gems right so අපි ඒක බොහොම surgery එකක් කරනවා වගේ තමයි මේ හදලා තියෙන්නේ right so the second part is right so it's act as a factory or blueprint right so class can of course model similar objects and of course so that is what we discussed so your class has instance variables instance methods etc then class can act as a factory right class can act as a factory so that facility is provided by all the object oriented programming languages like C++, Java, C# or whatever right so now let's see how a class can act as a factory now this is class models attributes and behaviors right so next part is now by using that class as long as you have that class you can create instance of that class or object of that class we use two words sometimes we use instance sometimes we use object same right object is an instance of class okay right so this is how you create a instance of account class so first you have to specify the class name then your variable name then you have to use the new keyword and also the class name again with brackets starting and ending brackets that is you are calling the constructor which we will discuss later now you have an instance of account object or account class right so or we have account object or instance of account class right so that is how you create a object so that is what what I have mentioned here so here you are creating a object instance of class A as part of to do the behavior of P the class A is creating instance of class B right so you can see now when this program is run how many objects are created can someone tell me when I run this program actually we can run this program right when you run this program basically we are running this main method how many objects are created obviously you can see here instance of class A is created so that is one object right so that is one object so there is object here right then So when class A is created, actually there will be B object is also created. When instance of class A is created, instance of class B is also created. Anyway, we will be discussing these things. Now you can see two objects are there. When you run this program, the JVM will create object of demo class also. Therefore, there will be another object that you can't see because JVM will create that. So altogether, when this system is run, there will be 1, 2, 3 objects created, right? 3 objects created, and afterwards these objects will be destructed. Okay. So that is why these diagrams, uh, the sequence diagram. So, so here we have shown all 3 objects. You can see three. Though we draw the classes, actually these objects will be created, right? So semester 3 students will have now better sense of why these having a lot of classes and why we are sending these messages, etc. Okay. So semester 1 students will gradually pick these things, right? Right. So this is another very important concept that I am going to explain, right? That is, when you create an object, you have to think it like this, right? So you have to, actually I highly recommend you to read a book called uh, right, Head First Java, right? If you are really serious about Java programming, Head First Java, right? You can download the PDF is available. Actually PDF, I also have the PDF. If you need, I can give you the right. If you just do a thing like ebook download, right, you will get the book, right? So this is the official site, Kathy Sierra. So she is the one who was the chief architect of the SCJP, now called OCJP exams, right? So the Head First Java book, I highly recommend you to read it if you are really interested. Of course, if you are interested about the exams only, don't read it, right? So never even think about reading it, right? So you will get the degree and you will keep that degree in your head and be a burden to the society, right? And if you want to learn these things and do something to the society, your organization, right? Yes, read it, right? Highly recommended. Okay. So what happens is we can subdivide this statement, right? So this one statement into 3 portions, right? So what are those 3 portions? Uh, so this is the first portion, this is the second portion, this assignment is the third portion. We will start with second portion, oh sorry, first portion. So account, say ACCT1 or A1 or AO, whatever, this is variable name, right? Reference variable name. That means we have something like a remote control that can control account object, right? So this is not the account object, this is a remote control that can be used to control account, right? Nothing else, right? So this is not going to control AC, or this is not going to control racing car or whatever, because the type is account. This remote control is capable of controlling, accessing account object. That's it, right? So forget about the rest of the stuff now. So you have that here. Now in your picture, only this is there when this is happening. Then the second part of the statement is new account. So that means that account object is created in the memory. Account object is created in the memory, right? So that is the second part, right? Now we have account, remote control that can control an account, right? We have an account, we have a remote control that can control any account, right? So this assignment means basically it's something like now your account remote control is pointing at this particular account, not any other account or any other thing. You are now pointing to this account. So now what will happen when you operate this remote controller, this account is going to do those behaviors and stuff like that, not any other account or anything else, right? So that is how you understand this particular line. So this is the most important thing to understand, and you have understand it in 3 steps, right? In 3 steps. Okay, right? So this is called a reference variable. So those are not primitive variables. So why it can refer to an object, right? So this is where you create an object. So when we create an object, what happens is in the memory, the memory will be allocated to right? Memory will be allocated to all the instance variables of that particular class, right? So there will be memory allocated. For example, if it is account, there will be memory allocated for the account number and balance, because it has only those two instance variables. So if you create another object like account ACCT2 equal new account, another set of memory locations will be allocated to keep the account number and uh, balance, right? So basically memory is allocated only for instance variables. We will discuss the static variables or class variables later. Remember, memory is allocated only for instance variables, right? So there won't be any memory allocations for behaviors or methods, right? Because behavior is something to do with processing, right? Behavior is something to do with processing. So only the memory is allocated for in this case there will be a string memory allocated for string for account number. Double, you know that in IEEE, if it is double is 64 bit, 64 bit will be allocated for the balance. There will be another set of bytes allocated for account number. That's it, right? So the moment you create object, there will be set of like 10 bytes or 12 bytes are now used in the memory, right? If you create another object, another 10 bytes is going to be used. So likewise, you can see the memory is getting increased. Why? We are using more and more memory. Of course, when once the object is no longer used, your JVM will, the Java virtual machine will release that memory to the heap. Remember, we discussed about the heap in computer system subject, the free area. It will release that memory, because otherwise there will be memory burst, right? So that will be done by, you don't have to release the memory. The memory will be released automatically by the JVM time to time, as long as you are not referring to that. So that is called automatic garbage collection. So in languages like C++, actually we have to delete that object. But in modern languages like Java, we don't have to do that. The JVM is going to do that. Okay, so that is a much easy for us. Right, now today itself you have to go through this note, right? So so again you have to do slow thinking, right? So don't do fast thinking. So if you have learned our book effective studying that I have uploaded, so I have mentioned that there are two kind of thinking. What is known as fast thinking, slow thinking. So fast thinking is needed if you want to do, say if you have in a say quiz program, you have to do fast thinking, right? If someone quickly asks something from you and you just say I just asked you a question in this session, you have to do fast thinking, right? Because I need that answer within 10 seconds, 15 seconds. In the exams you have to do fast thinking. But when you study serious concepts, complex concepts, you have to do slow thinking. Deliberately slow down the thinking, right? So otherwise you miss some important concepts, right? So because you miss some points here and there, you are not going to understand some other concepts later on, right? So therefore, deliberately think slowly, read slowly, keeping the attention to each and every terms. And of course, if there are some terms that you feel like interesting, mark those also, right? And make a short note. Then for the forever you are going to done with object oriented forever, right? So I hope you will live for another, say at 8 years or at least 60 years, right? So more and more IT will be used, right? So think about 20 years from now, more and more robotics, ITs, Internet of Things, right? Automations will be there. You might have to do some programming to get something done by your home environment also. Object oriented is going to be the case, right? So learn these things right now. More and more benefits you are going to get. Okay, so don't think about I am again going to learn these things in 20 years time. මම මේවා දමල ගහලා ඇවිල්ලා ආය අවුරුදු 20කින් විතර මේ BIT එකක් පටන් ගන්න ඉන්නේ. එහෙමනම් කරන්න හිතන්න එපා. Right? So once you understand this, it's going to be with you, right? Okay. So now so as I told you, now we are going to create this code, right? Account. So I was using the Notepad++ for the time being. Right? Class account. So I have the curly brackets. Now I'm going to have some instance variables. Remember, attributes are mapped into instance variables. So I will just put up a instance variables. I'm going to have a string variable, account number, ACCT num. I'm always following some conventions that we mentioned in the second session. Then let's say balance. I will go for double balance. So this is basically what? This is basically the attributes, right? Then I'm going to create some behaviors also. Uh, so void deposit, right? So you have to send the amount. So say I am expecting double value. Say amount. We will revisit these methods one by one again. So just to do some practical things and start things. That is why we are doing. Then withdraw. So again you have to tell me what is the amount. So basically these are instance variable, instance methods, right? So these are instance variable, these are instance methods. Okay, so what we have to do here is, in deposit what we want to do is, this balance is going to be increased by this amount, right? So this balance is going to be increased by this amount. So this is related to global variables also, right? But this is different. So that means balance equal balance plus amount, right? So if you like, you can just make it even shorter. I can write plus equal. Remember we discussed that as arithmetic assignments, so we can write like that also, make it even, right? So similarly, the withdraw, what happens? The amount has to be reduced. So this is a very simple class that we can think of, right? This is a very simple class that we can think of. Anyway, I'll be starting the IntelliJ again, assuming that it can run now, right? So for the time being, I'm going to just use the command prompt cmd d cd code. Now I'm going to cd code. Now I'm going to compile the file javac account.java. Right. So if no errors, I will be getting the account class, right? Account class still it is working. Yes, right. So I got the account class, right? But there is no main method here, so I can't run this. To run this, I need another class, sort of a control class. So I'm going to create that also. So let's see whether we can do it from itself now. I'm going to delete this particular class because it's faster for me to do the IDE. Right, I'm going to create a class called account, new Java class. We discussed this last time, how to use the IntelliJ account, right? So because I have the code, I'm going to copy paste. Variables and some methods, instance methods, right? Instance methods and instance variables. You can't run this because you must have main method to run, right? So what we are going to do is, we are going to create another class to do that as control class. So let's call it account demo. Account demo. So if you lose, so if you lose your my voice, just let me know in the WhatsApp group. Okay, right? Account demo. So there I am going to have the main method. So you know how to write the main method in IntelliJ, psvm tab, right? Psvm tab. So now I am going to create an account object, account, let's say a1 equal new account, Then now remember, memory is allocated to account. We have a remote control to that to a account object, and now we have our remote control or A1 is referring to that particular account object, right? So now your memory is something like this. So have that picture also. uh, so now what happens is, in your memory, right? So this is the memory. Memory is allocated for a particular account, right? So it can keep account number and balance. Still we have not set, but memory is allocated to have these two variables. Okay, that's it. Right, now let's see what to do. Now we can use this reference variable to refer to behaviors as well as attributes, right? A1, if I want to set a attributes like account number, I can use a dot notation and say, because account number is a string, I use 001. Now this memory location has account number memory location as 001, right? 001. Similarly, I can set the balance also. A1 dot balance, that is 100, or let's say 1000, right? Okay, so now if I want to print this value, I can just use SOU2 out A1 dot say account number, and I will print the same time its balance also, A1 dot balance. So make sure you code, right? So this, there must be plus concatenation, so it will print. Now these memory locations have the values, right? So it will print the account number and balance, right? So try to understand these things. Anytime you have a problem, you have to ask, right? So don't keep your problems with you, right? So I am here to help you, right? Of course there can be people, they don't like to ask when they ask questions, right? But so let's see, it's still running. Still it's getting running. First time it will take some time, more time to run. Now here you have the 001 and 10,000. Now you can see the output is 001 and 10,000. So similarly, I can create another object. Right? I can create another object. So that is in the reality, yes. So there will be so many objects created in the runtime. So you have to give it a different name, because now we have a different sort of in our analogy, sort of a different remote controller to another object is created, right? So and this is referring to the other object now, say 2, and it has balance of 5,000. Now if I want to print that, I can print that also. Now in the runtime there are two objects in the memory, so its balance and account number is different, right? So that is why we call them instance variable. Each instance has its own memory, right? So now another object is created in the memory, which has a 002 as the account number, 5,000 as the balance, right? So those are two different things, and because we have two different, so this should be A2. We have two remote controls in our program or the main method. So let's run it. So it will print 002 and 5,000. Okay. Right. So the first one print 001 and 10,000. The second A2 reference variable is referring to the other object. Now we can see, using the reference variable we can set values, and also we can read values, right? So using the reference variable you can set values. That is what we are doing here, and also we can read the value in that memory location, right? So that is what we are doing here, right? And of course, using the reference variable, not only set values and those things, right? We can do some behaviors also. හරි ඔයාලට පේනවනේ අර AC එක පාවිච්චි කරලා අපිට එකපාරට ටෙම්පරේචර් එක සෙට් කරන්න පුළුවන් 20 කියලා. අපිට හැබැයි අපිට ඕන නම් ටෙම්පරේචර් ඉන්ක්‍රීස් කරන්න කියන behavior එකට යන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට එක එක ඉන්ක්‍රීස් කරනවා. අපි දැන් කෙලින්ම සෙට් කිරිල්ලක් කරේ. ටෙම්පරේචර් එක මේකට සෙට් කරා. මෝඩ් එක මේකට සෙට් කරා. දැන් කරන්න හදන්නේ අපි behavior එකක් පෙන්නන්න කියනවා. ටෙම්පරේචර් එක ඉන්ක්‍රීස් කරනවා කියන behavior එක. හරි නැත්නම් මේක off කරනවා කියන behavior එක. අන්න ඒ වගේ වැඩක් තමයි දැන් කරන්නේ. So what we are going to do is we are going to using the remote control we are going to ask it to do the deposit behavior, right? Of course the customer has to initiate this. මේකට message එක ආවම තමයි මේක වෙන්නේ. අපි මේ මැද හරියක් කෝඩ් කරන්නේ UI එක නෙමෙයි. A1 dot let's say deposit, right? Say we are asking it to deposit 1000. So if you don't want these hints to be appear, you can say there is a way to get rid of this. Anyway, so let's keep it, forget about this amount, right? So it's a hint they have given. Now assume that now I want to print. Now A2 is not going to be changed, only A1 is now changed, because now deposit means its balance must be increased by 1000. Now remember earlier balance was 10,000, now balance is going to be 11,000 because this memory is going to be updated with 10,000, another 1,000 added, right? Of course the addition is done by the processor, then the results will be written back to this memory location. හරි computer system subject එකද ඔළුවේ තියෙනවා නේ. එතකොට ඔයාලට වැඩි 100ක් තේරෙයි. Right, now you can see earlier 001 the balance was 10,000. Now balance of 001 is 11,000 because at that point the balance is 11,000, but still the balance of 002 is 5,000. If I again print the balance of 002, it is not going to be changed. It is not going to be changed. So let's print that also. Still the a balance of account 2, because we didn't do anything else other than setting, it must be still 5,000. It must be still 5,000. So I'm doing it very slowly because I know that this is the foundation, right? So if you have the foundation, you can see still it is 002 has nothing to do. We didn't do anything afterwards, right? Right. So I hope you got it. Now let's move on. Right. So let's now discuss further. Now you have some experience with coding, so you have to do that coding, right? Right. So this is exactly what we did. So this example has few more steps, right? So basically what we did is the same thing. Okay, same thing. Right. Now let's look at these things seriously, right? අපි නිකම් මේ කෝඩ් එක දිහා බැලුවා විතරයිනේ. මේ එක එක කතා කරේ නෑනේ. ඔන්න දැන් අපි එක එක අරගෙන කතා කරනවා. මොනවද මේ තියෙන්නේ කියලා. So what are the things that is in a class, right? So when you take a class, you can have only these 5 things in the class. Only these 5 things, nothing else. Okay. What you can have the instance variable, you can have static variables, you can have the constructor or constructors, you can have instance methods, you can have class or static methods. හරි casual විදියට නම් කතා කරන්න එපා. සමහරුන්ගේ මොනවාද class වල තියෙන්නේ කියලා මම කියනවා methods තියෙනවා කියලා, variables තියෙනවා කියලා. එහෙමනම් කතා කරන්න එපා. ඔයා serious කෙනෙක් නෙමෙයි. ඔයාලා engineering කරන්න බෑ. ඔයාට හොඳයි වෙන මොන හරි පොඩි පොඩි වැඩ ටිකක් කරගෙන ඉන්න. හරි අත්කම් වැඩ ටිකක් කියන, right? So be very specific, right? Instance variables you can have class or static variables, you can have constructors, you can have instance methods, you can have class or static methods, nothing else. Okay, so those are the things that can be there, and we are going to learn what are those things. Then you know exactly what is, whenever you are looking at a class, then you know exactly what you are looking at. Okay, right? So let's look at it one by one. So instance variables means if you have variables inside the class, not inside methods, right? Outside the methods, those are called instance variables. So why we call it instance variable? Because each instance is going to get its own memory allocated. So that is what we demonstrated right now, right? So when we created two accounts, the account 1 got its own memory allocated, account 2 got its own memory allocated. So that is why we call it instance variable. Okay, right. So let's move on. Then we can have so the instance variable can be accessed by instance methods as well, so that we will discuss later. You can just refer to the variable, or you can use the this keyword to refer to the your instance variables, right? But use of this keyword is optional. So we right. Uh, then outside of your class, if you want to refer, you have to use that object reference and the variable name, right? Object reference and variable name. So that is what we did in our main method in the demo class. If you want to refer to this instance variable balance, we have to use the object reference a dot the variable name. But within the deposit method, we just use the balance. Right? We just use the balance. Remember, we just use the balance, or what we could have done is we could have do like this dot. That is also possible, right? This dot, right? semester 3 students ලා සමහරව ඉන්නවා මෙතන. ඔයගොල්ලන් මතකද අපි PHP කරද්දී object oriented වලින් අපි පාවිච්චි කරා මොකද්ද? මේවා කරේ කොහමද? මෙහෙම notation එකක් පාවිච්චි කරා. මතකද? ඔන්නෝම notation එකක්, sorry. මෙහෙම notation එක. ඒ වෙනුවට Java වල කරන්නේ dot එක. අපි කිව්වා PHP වල මේක must එකක් කියලා. මේ this කියලා අනිවාර්යෙන් කියන්න ඕනේ කියලා. PHP වල අපි කිව්වා Java වල එහෙම කියන එක අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නැහැ කියලා. හරි, PHP වල ඔන්න ඔහොම ලියන්නේ. Java වල අපි this කියලා ඔහොම ලියන්න පුළුවන්. ඔයාලට කැමති නම් this කියන එක නොලිය ඉන්නත් පුළුවන්. හරි. දැන් ඔයාලට තේරෙයි ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඊළඟ semesters වල PHP කරන්න ගියාම මේ knowledge එක නැත්තම් මට PHP තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ ඊට පස්සේ. right, මොකද අපි Java එක්ක compare කරලා තමයි PHP ඉගෙන ගන්න. right. So within the class, if you want to refer to the instance variable, you can just refer it, or you can use the this dot notation. But from outside the class, if you want to refer, right, you have to from outside the class, if you want to refer, you have to use the reference variable name and the class name and the property, right, and the property, right. So that is outside. So how to access instance variable within your class, how to access the class instance variable from outside the class, right. So those are the two things, right, within the class, from outside the class, right. So that is all about instance variable. Now if you have any questions related to instance variable, you have to ask, or if you are shy, you can ask in the WhatsApp group also. Right, so as usual we don't get any questions because not because you have fully understood it, right. I know that, not because you have fully understood it, because next you are not going to, all of you are not going to get A pluses, right. Because you are not having that culture. Okay, that is the, I know, right, because you don't have that culture of critical thinking, right. අපි දන්නවා ඉතින් ඕගොල්ලෝ ගැන. right. So now let's move on to the next one, the class variable or static variable. Class variable or static variable. So class variable or static variable means that variable is not specific to instance. Remember previously the account number, balance, those variables are specific to each and every instance, because my account balance is different from your account balance. So my account need a specific variable, your account need another instance of that variable, another memory location, if both are working on the same time. But class variable means that variable is common to each and every instance of the class. Then we call it a class variable. Now you can see how they have given the name. That variable is common to the, is specific to instance variable. That variable is common to the class variable, right, class variable. And also we just use the key, that static is basically the keyword we use, right. Therefore forget about that. How to specify that our variable is not an instance variable, you must have the static keyword, right. If the static keyword is not there, it is a instance variable. If the static keyword is there, it is not instance variable, it is a static variable. So basically the better term is class variable, because we use the keyword static, sometimes we call them static variables. Okay, right. So static variables, so very good example for static variable for in this case is for the account class, right. For the account class, I will have static variable, right? I will have static variable, say the interest rate. Now remember, account number balance is specific to each and every instance, but interest rate, static variable, static for class. You know that that interest rate is not going to be specific to each and every instance. All the instance of that particular class is going to have the same interest rate. හරි ඔයාට සම්පත් බැංකුවේ savings account එකක් තියෙනවා නම් මට තියෙනවා නම් ඒකම වර්ග account එකක් නම් අපි හැමෝටම හම්බ වෙන්නේ ඒ account එක තියෙන හැමෝටම හම්බ වෙන්නේ එකම interest rate එක. Right? So what we can do is make them static. Static, then you need to have the data type, right? Double, and let's say interest rate. So you can assign the value also, let's say 0.1, so 10% interest. So that I prefer to mark it as static rather than non-static. Okay, so if I make it as static, it is going to work, but the bad thing is if I make it non-static, every time account object is created, memory is allocated for interest rate. That is really bad, because anyway interest rate is going to be the same. So therefore when you call it static, what happens is when the first object of that account is created, while the memory is allocated for account number and balance, the static another variable memory is allocated for interest rate, right? Interest rate only once. Then when the next account object is created, it will be allocated, memory will be allocated for account number and balance, but not for interest rate, because interest rate we have separate memory allocated once, right? So all these objects can refer to this static variable because it is common, right? And again it's a variable, therefore if you change that, it is going to be reflected to all the objects. But in this case interest rate we are not going to change much, but it's going to be sort of a constant. But remember, this is a variable. If you want to make it constant, we have to use a final keyword, right? So we discussed that under methods, right? But anyway we just keep it as a variable because for the time being I just want to explain you the class variables. Okay, right? Right, so that is how the class variable or static variables or static basically the class variables work, right? Right, now we are going to discuss about class or static methods, right? Class methods or static methods. So static methods are methods, right? So anyway, so class methods or static methods are methods which are static in nature, right? So I will explain what is mean by that. First I will write a small code to explain that. Say I want to get that balance value, right? Get that balance value using a method, not by referring to the variable directly. So I can say that something like, if a method returns, what we have to do, we did methods last time. We have to have the return types. In this case it's a double, because interest rate is double. Let's say get interest rate. So these things are very very important. ඔයාලට නිකන් තේරෙයි මේවා මාර සරලයි කියලා. මාර සරලයිද කියලා ඔයාලට තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් ෆයිනලි ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක කරන්න ගියාට පස්සේ බුදුහම්මෝ මට කරගන්න බැරිව කියලා හිතුනවා. හරි? Right. So let's say I'm returning the interest rate. Right? Interest rate. So this method is not referring to any interest in instance variable, therefore I can mark it as static. So I can say static double get interest. So that is a class of static method, right? So static methods you can mark using the static keyword. So static methods means method which do not refer to any of the instance variables. That's it. So what is static method or class method? Method which does not refer to any of the instance variable. Of course, it is not refer. If it might refer to a class variable, but not to instance variable. For example, this method is referring to a within the body referring to a balance which is an instance variable. I can't make it static, right? So let's try to make it static. So you can see all of a sudden I get an error message. You can see this is red. So if I try to compile, I'm going to get compile errors, right? I'm going to get compile errors. So let's try to compile it or run it or whatever. Anyway, I can't run this. You can see everywhere it is red now. Metan red වෙලා තියෙනවා, metan red වෙලා තියෙනවා. හරි, metan red වෙලා තියෙනවා. So that means compile errors. So basically, if your method is referring to instance variable, that is an instance method, not a static or class method. You can't mark this, right? So that's it. I hope you got the idea. If a method is referring to instance variable, it must be instance method. If a method is not referring to instance variables, you can mark it as a class or static method. Okay, so this is instance method, this is a static method, right? So if you have something like this, void greetings, right? So SOUT, welcome to banking system, welcome to your account. Now can I make it a instance method or can I make it a class method? Of course you can make it instance method, right? So instance method don't have any restrictions, but this is not referring to any instance variables, right? Or we have only two instance variable in this case, right? So it is not referring to any instance variable. I can certainly make it static, no issue, no issue, right? You can see static methods have very general behavior. Regardless of from which object you are calling it, it will have the same behavior. But instance methods, when you call it from different instances, though the logic is the same, the outcome might be different. So that is how you understand the logic is the same, but outcome will be different because the logic refer to the instance variable, and instance variable will have different values for different objects. Therefore, the outcome will be different, though the same logic is used, right? Of course, the instance methods are going to have a lot of logic here, like if, conditions, loops, etc. Two instance calling the same instance method, the outcome will be different. But two instance calling the same static method, the outcome is going to be the same. So that is another reason why we call it static, right? It has a static nature, right? Okay, right. So you have to understand what is mean by instance variable, what is mean by static variable, what is mean by instance method, what is mean by a class or static method. Okay, right. So I have given some more examples. For example, if this class mathUtil add and subtract method, I have made it static because it's like a calculator, right? So මේ calculator එකෙන් මම 5 5 එකතු කරත් අනිත් calculator එකෙන් එකතු කරත් 5 5 10 එනවා. හරි, උදේට එකතු කරත් හවසට එකතු කරත් 10 වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒවා instance variable මත depends වෙන්නේ නැහැ, right? So make them static methods, right? So make them static methods, right? So likewise you have to start thinking, right? පොඩි කතන්දර මේ දීලා තියෙන්නේ. මේ serious ඒවා දීලා නැහැ වාට. හරි, serious ඒවා කරන්න පුළුවන් මට project එක කරන්න. හරි, බලමු serious ඒවා කරයිද නැද්ද කියලා එදාට. මේ දීලා තියෙන්නේ පොඩි කතන්දර. හරි, මේ නිකන් 5යි 5යි එකතු කරනවා, account එකක් තියෙනවා. හරි, තව ඊළඟට දැන් animals ලා use කරලා පොඩි demonstration එකක් කරන්න. ඒ කතන්දරයක් වාට build කරන්න. හරි, කතන්දරයක් build කරන්න. ඒවා head first java book එකේ කියවුවොත් එහෙම. head first java book එක තනි කරම කතන්දර පොතක්. තනි කර කතන්දර පොතක්. ඔයාලට කතන්දරයක් තමයි උගන්වන්නේ. කතන්දරය ඉවරනකොට ඔයාලට object oriented සහ java පුළුවන් වෙන්න ඕන. හරි. ඊට පස්සේ ඔයාලට පුළුවන් මේ කතන්දරේ පාවිච්චි කරලා serious දේවල් කරන්න. කතන්දරේ තේරුම් ගත්ත අය. හරි. හරි, එච්චරයි. Okay, right. So let's move on. So we have given another example. So I highly recommend you to code this and run this. Each and every code are running codes. නිකන් අප code එක ලියලා දාන්නේ නැහැ නේ පොතට නේද? හොඳට compile වෙනවද බලලා. And also if you find any issues, just let me know. I will update. Right. Right. So you will understand what is mean by instance variable. And so this is an example for a cricket match. Right. So So we have the players. So you can see the players call is an instance variable. Why? Every player will have his own score. Every player will have his own score, right? But team score and the number of wickets is static. Why? That is not specific to the player. That is a common thing. Team එකට තමයි score එක තියෙන්නේ. Team එකට තමයි wicket ගන්න ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. So we have marked them static, right? Then these are now we are scoring. So when you score එකක් දීවම your score is going to be incremented, right? So that you can see your instance variable is incremented, but at the same time your team score is also incremented. අපි දන්නවනේ scoreboard එකක් වැඩ කරන විදිය. හරි කවුරු හරි ලකුණු 4ක් ගත්තම ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් ප්ලේයර් එකේ ලකුණුත් වැඩි වෙනවා. ටීම් එකේ ස්කෝර් එකත් වැඩි වෙනවා. ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් ප්ලේයර් එකේ ලකුණු ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්ස්ටන්ස් වේරියබල් එක. මොකද මහේලට තියෙන ලකුණු නෙමෙයි සංගක්කාරට තියෙන. මහේලට ලකුණු 5යි සංගක්කාර 20යි. හැබැයි මහේල 4ක් ගැහුවම මහේලගේ ලකුණු ගන්න එකතු වෙනවා. Total team score එකත් එකතු වෙනවා. So team score is a static variable and the wickets are also static variable. For example, when Mahela get out, all of a sudden the wicket will get incremented, right? So likewise, now you can think of some practical scenarios, right? ඊට පස්සේ ඔබ තව ටිකක් ඉස්සරහට ගියාම UI එකකුත් ආවට පස්සේ you can your imagination is the limit, right? Your imagination is the limit to do interesting things, right? But unfortunately there are some final year students also, they have they can't do some simple thing like that, right? So something somewhere someplace something has gone wrong, right? So I don't know where. Okay, of course some people are doing their projects right now. Okay, so they have started their project, right? Then we have the concept called constructors, right? Constructors. So constructor is a language element. So remember what we can have: instance variable, class variable, instance method, class method, constructors. That's all, right? So now we are in the final element, constructor. So constructor is a language element which is invoked when object is created using the new keyword, right? So the whenever you call the create object using the new keyword, if you have written a constructor, it will be called automatically, and that's the only place where it can be called. Methods, of course, you can call over and over, but constructor you can't call over and over. It will be automatically called when the object is created. For example, when this line is executed, the constructor of the account will be called, and that's it. You can't call it again and again. But methods you can call it again and again. Okay. So how to create constructors in a class? You have to, it's something like a method, right? Something like a method, but only thing is its name must be same as case sensitive class name, right? Its name must be same as case sensitive class name, and there must not be any return type, not even void, right? If you have void, it is going to be a method, not a class, not a constructor. So if you follow those tools, have something like a method without return type, name must be same as the case sensitive class name, that is going to be a constructor. Okay, and it is going to be called by the JVM when you are creating object. Okay, so then someone will ask, what is the purpose of constructor? The purpose of constructor is if you want to do something at the object creation, like initializing some values, right? Get some resources like database connections, you can do those things here, right? So those things you will learn when you are doing web development. In semester 3 you will learn these kind of things where we will be creating some classes in PHP. In the constructor we will get the database connection, right? Database connection, then the methods will have the connection, right? So you will learn the practical usages of constructors when you are moving to the next semesters. Okay, right? So if you want to do something at the object creation time, do it in the constructor. How to write a constructor? Have something like a method but not having return type. The name must be same as the case sensitive class name, then the JVM knows that that is the constructor. Okay, right? So let's have a constructor for our class, because our account class is not having constructor right now. It has instance variable, class variables, instance methods and class methods, but not a constructor. Usually constructors we write below instance variables and static variables, but not after instance method. But again, that's a convention. Professional programmers follow conventions like rules because they know how to work in team environment, professional environment. Okay, others can also code anywhere, but be a professional programmer, right? So this is my constructor. So remember, I didn't have, still I am not having a constructor in my account class, but I managed to create account objects. So the reason is, so I will explain that also. The reason is, if your class does not have constructor, what will happen is Java will provide you a default constructor. So all those things are mentioned in your note, right? So it will be mentioned somewhere. Right, you can see when no explicit constructors are provided in the source code of the class, Java provides a default constructor which take no arguments and perform no special actions or initializations. Obviously, it is not going to do anything because you haven't written anything, and you haven't even written the constructor. But Java provides you that default constructor to facilitate creation of objects. Right? Creation of objects. That is why we were able to create objects even without having a constructor, right? So if you don't have to do anything special, of course you don't have to write the constructor because Java has the default constructor provided to you. Okay, but if you want to do some specific things, you have to write your own constructor. Then that constructor will be used rather than the default constructor. And of course your constructor will be called, and again the default constructor will be called. Those things we will discuss under inheritance. Okay, so how to create a constructor? Account. The method constructor name must be same as the case sensitive class name, right? Case sensitive class name. Then don't have a return type. Right? So I'm not going to do any special thing. I'm just going to say some system out just to check whether the constructor is called. Account created. Account created. So now let's run it. Now the moment this line is executed, that constructor must be called, right? So that is how the object-oriented programming works. Right? So let's run it. So here constructor must be called, here constructor must be called. In between there are no s out, therefore those two lines are going to be the first two lines. Right? Constructor created statement because constructor is called. Must be called, right? So let's wait and see whether it's getting called. Yes, now let's see. You can see account created because we have created two objects. If you are having another object created, this will be called again. This will be called again, right? Now last time we discussed how to do debugging also. If you are curious to see whether these things are getting called, what you can do is have a debug point here, right? Have a debug point here, breakpoint here, right? Of course, you can have a breakpoint somewhere here also, right? So then you can if you want, you can have a breakpoint somewhere here also, and you can just do a debugging. දැන් අද මේවා කරන කට්ටිය තමයි ඉස්සරහට මොනවා හරි ලෝකෙට වැඩක් වෙන මේ පිරිස හරි අද මේවා කරන්නේ නැතුව හරි හොඳට වෙන වැඩක් කරන කට්ටිය ඒගොල්ලෝ විභාග BIT විභාගේ ගන්න බලාගෙන ඉන්න කට්ටිය හරි විභාගේ පාවිච්චි කරලා ඒගොල්ලෝ මොකක් හරි ජොබ් එකකට රින් කරලා ඒක ඇතුලේ IT නෙමෙයි වෙන මොනවා හරි උටපටයක් කර කර මැරෙනකන් ඉන්න බලාගෙන ඉන්න කට්ටිය. හරි of course if you are a other professional that is okay. ඒ වැඩිවත් හරියට කරනවා නම් කමක් නැහැ. ගොඩක් අය ඒවත් කියන හරියට කරන්නේ නැහැ. හරි. Right. So now you can see I can do the now you can see construct is called. You can see මෙතනට ආවේ construct call එක. I know new එකේ හිටියන්නේ. හරි. ඔන්න දැන් ඔන්න ආයි construct call වෙන්න ඕන දැන්. දැක්ක construct call. හරි. ඊළඟට deposit කරද්දී එහෙම මට ඕන මෙතන ස්ටෙපින් කරලා යන්න පුළුවන්. ස්ටෙපින් කරලා යන්න බලන්න ඩිපොසිට් එකට යනවාද කියලා. Yes. ස්ටෙපින් කරලා amount එක 1000 කියලා. So that is up to you to do that kind of things, right? And work with those kind of things, right? So I'm going to remove that breakpoint. Okay. So that is what is known as constructor. If you want, you can have constructors. Otherwise, default constructor is going to do. But if you want to do some special things, have constructors. Okay. Right, so how the Java memory allocation works, I explained already. If there are instance variable, each instance variable is going to have memory. If there are class variable, only once when the first object is created, the variable will be allocated for each and every class variable, right? Then when you are no longer using the objects, the JVM is going to garbage collect all the memory, right? It is not happening the moment the program is run. No, the JVM will do it in a separate thread. When it has some, when it doesn't have any other work, it will gradually clean up the memory, right? So ඊයේ මතකයි semester 3 යට අපි PHP වලින් මේක කරා. එතනදී අපි destruct එකක් කියලා ලිව්වා. destruct එක එවෙලෙම call කරා. එවෙලෙම call වුණා. හැබැයි මේකේ destruct කියලා concept එකක් නැහැ, right? So in Java we don't have concept called destructor, but rather we have another concept called finalize, right? Finalize. If you want, so that is a protected method, protected void, right? If you want, you can use that, right? If you want, you can use that. So you have to override, right? So this is optional because this method is in one of super class, right? So if you want, you can write something here, right? Say account is destroyed, but when we run, right, this is not destructor, this is just a finalize method. When we run this account demo, we are not going to see that executed, because it is going to be executed by the JVM in a separate thread later, right? So you can see there is nothing. So you can see account created is there, but account destructed is not there. Account destructed is not there, though we write it in the finalize method, right? So those who are in this class, who we remember we did yesterday, we did PHP. There we had the constructor and destructor, both we saw that yes, destructor is also called, but here you don't see that this is something like a destructor but not the destructor. But whatever the code inside this will be called by the JVM when the garbage collector runs, right? So we never know when it is going to be run. It is going to be run sometimes back, then this will be called. But anyway, you are not going to see the system out println. But if you have done some many other things like releasing some resources, database connections, etc., those things are going to happen, right? Okay, but it is not going to be called immediately. Okay, right? So that is how the memory allocations work, right? So if you want, you can use the finalize method, right? Finalize method, but anyway, don't expect it to be executed immediately. Okay, right? Now this is very important diagram, right? So this shows the accessibility of each and every member, right? For example, if you take instance method can access the instance variables, right? Instance method can access instance variables, so that is why we call it instance methods anyway. And of course, instance methods can access static or class variables as well, right? So both the variables are available for instance methods. But when it comes to class methods, of course it can refer to class variables, but it cannot refer to instance variables, because if it refer to instance variable, it is no longer a class method. It is a instance method, right? So that is why the moment you refer to instance variable, you can't mark it as a static, right? So that is very important. And of course, the constructor also have access to the instance variables and class variables, right? So constructor is also having the access to instance variables and class variables. And when it comes to method calling, your instance methods can call your other instance methods, and also your instance methods can call class methods, right? Class methods. And on the other hand, your class method can only call other class methods. Your class methods cannot call instance methods, right? Your class methods cannot call instance methods. So that I will keep you to think about. So why class methods are not allowed to call instance method? That's something you have to think and come up with an answer. Okay, right? Other thing is, of course, the constructor can call other constructors, right? So there can be constructor overloading. Constructor can call other constructors, and of course constructor can call instance methods and class methods as well. But none of these can call constructor, because constructor is something that has to be invoked only at the object runtime, object creation time. Therefore instance method, class methods can be called at any time. Therefore they are not allowed to call constructor otherwise the constructor is going to be called over and over. So they want to make sure that constructor is called only once at object creation. Therefore, calling for the constructor from instance method and class method is restricted or not allowed. Okay. So every restriction and every possibility has a meaning, right? Because of this they have allowed, because of this they have restricted or not allowed, right? So that is you have what you have to think, right? So it is not that you like මේක පූජාව වගේ හරි මේක පාඩම් කරන්න එපා instance method එකට මේක access කරන්න පුළුවන් නෑ එහෙම නෙමෙයි. ඔයා කල්පනා ඇයි instance method එකට මේකට access දුන්නේ? ඇයි instance method එකට මේකට access නොදුන්නේ? Right? So why? So the most important thing as a human, right, is why, right? So ඔයාට බල්ලට පුරුසට මොනවා හරි කොහොම බල්ලා why කියන්නේ නැහැ නේද? ඒක කරනවා. So but you are a human, think about why, right? So everything has a reason, then you understand, then if things are going to remain with you, then you are going to use those things because you have very good confidence of what is, not only you know what to do, you know what is happening in the background and you know why they are doing those things are happening in that way, right? So that is very good, right? So that is, you have that capacity as a human, right? Very strong processing power, but lot of people don't use it, right? A lot of people don't use it. They just I don't like to comment on
Sir,
that. Okay. Yes.
sir,
Yes.
sir, what about the constants variable?
Yes, constants are actually special case of variables that we are going to take separately, right? So the constant is basically a variable which we can only initialize once. Therefore, constant are special variables. Therefore, we are going to take it as a separate thing. Separate thing. Actually, instance variable can be a constant. Class variable can be a constant. In that case, only thing is we have to use the final keyword in front of, right? So anyway, we'll discuss that later. Okay. So that is a very good question. So it is not a main concept here. So the main concepts are instance variable, class variable, constructor, instance method, class methods. Constants are special case of variables. Therefore, we don't take it as a separate thing because whatever you can do with the instance variable can be done to the instance constant, for instance constant, and also static variable can be a static constant. Then whatever you can do with that accessibility will be there. Only thing is you can't change it, right? You can't change it. You can set the value once, then of course you can only read the value, you can't change it, right? So anyway, we'll take that example also later. Okay, right? So this is very important. හරි මේක තනියෙන් වෙලාවක ඇඳලා බලන්න. ඇඳලා බලලා හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඔය හැම එකටම රීසන් අවුට් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඇයි මෙහෙම allow කරේ? ඇයි මෙහෙම allow නොකරේ? මේ object oriented කියන්නේ එක්තරා concept එකක්. ඒ concept එක උඩ තමයි තනිකර programming දුවන්නේ. හරි මේ ලෝකේ කොයි මේ වෙලාවේ කොහේ හරි software developer කෙනෙක් object oriented විදිහට මම කියන්නේ 190ම object oriented විදිහටයි code කරන්න කියලා. එයාගේ ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරන්නේ මේ ටික තමයි. හරි මේක ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරන්න පටන් ගත්ත මිනිස්සයාට object oriented විදිහට code කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේක ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරන්නේ නැති මිනිස්සයාට එයා ටිකක් බයෙන් කෝඩ් කරන්නේ. අතන ටිකක් කල් එයා එහෙම බයෙන් කෝඩ් කරයි. නමුත් එයා confident software developer කෙනෙක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. so confident software developer කෙනෙක් වෙන්නේ මේවා ටික ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරද්දි මේවා ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරන්නේ මේවා දිහා බලන් ඉඳලා නෙමෙයි. එයා කෝඩ් කරනකොට සහ මේවත් එක්ක ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරනකොට එයාට තේරෙනවා. එයා ඇප්‍රීෂিয়েට් කරන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. ඔව් මේක හරියි මේක මෙහෙම කරලා තියුනේ. හරි කියලා. අන්න එයාට ඔළුවට වදින්න පටන් ගන්නවා. හරි. සමහර දේවල් ඔළුවට වදින්නේ ප්‍රැක්ටිකලි කරාත් විතරයි. හරි. ඔයා ජීවිතේට පීනන්නේ නැහැනේ ගොඩේ ඉඳලා නේද? ඔයා බයිසිකලෙන් නගින්න නැතුව බයිසිකල් පදින්නේ නැහැනේ. හැබැයි මේ ලෝකේ ඉන්නවා මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාව කියන රටේ ඉන්නවා සෑහෙන්න මානසික රෝගීන් පිරිසක් කෝඩ් කරන්නේ නැතුව ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑමින් ඉගෙන ගන්න. හරි. පිස්සන් කොටුවේ ඉන්න උන පිරිසක් ඉන්නවා. හරි. අර ඇඳ උඩට වෙලා බයිසිකල් පදිනවා, ඇඳ උඩට වෙලා පීනනවා වගේ ඇඳ උඩට වෙලා කෝඩ් ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑමින් ඉගෙන ගන්න පිස්සු ටිකක් ඉන්නවා. හරි. සෝ ඒගොල්ලෝ ගැන මට හරි දුකයි ඉතින්. හරි. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන මොකක්ද වෙන වැඩක් කරගන්න ඒක පාවිච්චි කරලා. හරි. හරි. So now we are moving to the method overloading, and of course we will be discussing the method overriding. We are going to discuss after inheritance, right? So this is method overloading. So method overloading means it's not a very serious thing. That is the first thing I want to tell. So some people think method overloading is a very serious thing. So there are serious things, not that serious things. What I have explained in so far is very serious things, and of course the inheritance, polymorphism, those are very serious things. Method overloading is just a sine bola thing, right? Method overloading means having more than one method in a class with same name but different signature, right? So that is called method overloading, right? You can have methods with same name as long as their signature is different. So when we say signature, signature include the name and the parameter. That's all. Return type is not part of the signature. When we say signature, the name and parameters. So as long as that signature is different, you can have it. For example, here no parameter, here one parameter, therefore two different signatures. Here, though we have two parameters, this one is a int parameter, this one is a string parameter, again two signatures. You can have this method as well as this method, right? Here the number of parameters are different, therefore the signature is different, right? So you can see how the signature make differentiate. Either the number of parameters are different or the data type is different. So that is how signature becomes different. So that is why we can have those two, because the data type is different. That is why we can have these two, number of parameters are different. So all those are overloaded methods. Okay. So what happens is, if I call this do something method and send a something like 5, the Java runtime is going to call this. If I send the do something method with 5 comma 10, it is going to call this. If I send do something method with the within double quotes hello, it is going to call this. So likewise, by looking at your number of parameters and data type, it is going to call the correct method. Though the name is the same, it will call the correct version of the overloaded method. So that is what is known as overloading. Overloading. So what is the next question you must ask? Why we have a concept called overloading, right? So can't we have different names for that? Yes, of course, you can name it like do something 1, do something 2, do something 3, etc. But why they have allowed this is, if these things are highly related things, only difference is the data, then it is much more easier for the you to remember the method names when you have just one method name, because we know that it is doing the same thing but for different data. That is why they have allowed this concept, uh, right? So that is why they have allowed this concept of keeping the same name. Then the programmer will find it easier to call those methods, because he know that this name is the same. Okay, that is how, for example, when we write system out println, right? So that is also overloaded, right? So you can send a string, right? For example, so I will explain, right? uh, I will explain. So here I will just use this for the time being. So always try to understand using practical examples. Okay. S out. Right? So if I send a string hello, so this is going to work, right? So you know that this is going to print hello. But if I send a numeric value like 10.5, now this is different, right? This is different, but still it is working. Now let's run it. So I'm doing this very slowly because foundations topics I am doing slowly, right? Nice to have topics I am doing fast, right? Because nice to have topic you have to understand using your foundation, right? So that is why in your BIT degree, your year 1 is the foundation course, right? So a lot of people, some people, they come to classes in year 3 without having the foundation. So have your foundation, then do your self studies. Okay. Right, so now you can see hello is printed, 10.5 is printed, right? So why? The reason is, so this println method they have overloaded. Actually this is coded by the JVM, the Java people. If actually if you want, you can go see this method also. You can just click control and click on this. Actually you can't do this here. So, so source code is not attached. Actually I will explain how to do that also. Usually you can click and go to the method. Actually there are two methods, right? So other thing is, if you go to the system class in the API, you will see that they have coded all these methods separately, right? All these code methods separately. So if you want, okay, now it is loading, so it is taking time. Okay, so I don't know whether I'm going to struck it again. So by right click, control and click, you can open that method. so it will take some time. I don't know whether I am going to stop. You can see here. So this is not my code. This is the print stream Java that I am calling. You can see string argument method is there. String argument method is there. You will see some other methods are also there. If you go down, println with object, you can see overloaded, right? There will be some more methods above. Right? Println with string, println with char array, right? Println with double. So that is what is called. What පේනද මේ මෙන්න මේ method එක තමයි මම call කරේ මෙන්න මෙතනදී. හරි මෙන්න මෙතනදී මෙතනදී call කරේ අර double කියන method එක. මෙතනදී call කරේ string කියන method. ඔක්කොම වෙනස මොකද්ද? ඒවා අපේ code නෙමෙයි මේ system කියන class එකේ. හරි system එකේ තියෙන out කියන මේ තනිකර තේරුම් ගන්නවට inner classes කරන්න ඕන. මේ මං කිව්වා ඔයාලට course එක ඉවර වෙනකොට මම කිව්වා මේ ක්ලාස් එකේ තියෙන හැම අකුරක්ම ඔයාලට 100% තේරෙන්න ඕන කියලා. හරි. මම කිව්වා ඒක ටික ටික තේරෙයි. පළවෙනි දවසේ තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. ටික ටික තේරෙයි කියලා. දැන් ඔයාලට ඉනර් ක්ලාසස් එහෙම කරාට පස්සේ මෙන්න මේ අවුට් කියලා මොකද්ද? ඒවත් ඔයාලට තේරෙන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. හරි. අපි ඉගෙන ගන්න තේරුම් ගන්න මිසක් ඉගෙන ගන්න තේරෙන්නේ නැති උඩපඩ ටික එකතු කරගන්න නෙමෙයිනේ. සමහර ඉගෙන ගන්න තේරුම් ගන්න නෙමෙයි. තේරෙන්නේ නැති දේවල් එකතු කරන්න. මේගොල්ලෝ වල පොටි කාලේ මුද්දර එකතු කරා වගේ තේරෙන්නේ නැති දේවල් එකතු කරනවා. හරි. ඊට වැඩි හොඳයි ගිහිලා ගෙම්බෝ එකතු කරගන්න. හරි. ගැරඩි එකතු කරගන්න. තේරෙන්නේ නැති දේවල් එකතු කරන්න එපා. එකතු කරගන්න ඕනේ. තේරෙන දේවල්. තේරෙන දේවල් එකතු කරගන්න එන්න කොන්ෆිඩන්ස් එනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ වැඩ කරනවා. තේරෙන්නේ නැති දේවල් එකතු කරගන්න එන්න බය වෙනවා, සද්ද නැති වෙනවා. හරි. ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන්නම් ඒවා වෙන කතා. හරි. ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන්නේ පිරුණු කලේ දියනසලේ, පිරුණු කලේ දියනසලේ නෙමෙයි. ඔබ හිස් කලේ. හරි. ගෙම්බෝ ඉන්න කලේ. හරි. නොතේරෙන දේවල් එකතු කරගත්ත කලේ. Right. So try to you will understand each and every bit of this at the end of this programming. Right. So code එකේ class එකේ තියෙන ඕන code එකක් කාට explain කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. Right. semester 1 programming ඉවර වෙද්දී යා course එක ඉවර වෙද්දී නෙමෙයි යා semester 1 programming ඉවර වෙද්දී හරියට වැඩේ කරොත්. Right. Okay. So let's move on. හරියට තමයි වැඩක් කරන්න ඕන. Right. So that is the concept of overloading, method overloading. So the correct version will be called, right? So I have given some examples. So you can code it and run it and see, right? And experiment with it. Not only just run it, then you do some experimentation and try to understand. Okay, right? But when it comes to overloading, you have to make what you have to know is if you have two methods having same name and same type and number of parameters but only change the return type, that is not going to work. You are going to get compile error, right? So you can't have two methods because this is the signature. Now you can see signature is the same, right? Signature කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? Method names and parameters, not the return type. Now here it is not that the signatures are different. The signatures are the same. Signatures are the same because here do something int, right? Do something int, here also do something int. හරි. මේ variable එකේ නම නෙමෙයි වැදගත් data type එක. හරි. මේක වෙනස් වුණාට වැඩක් නැහැ. ඔයා මෙහෙම method ලිව්වොත් එහෙනම් මොකද වෙන්නේ? compiler එකක් දෙනවා. compiler එකක් දෙනවා. ඇයි එහෙම වෙන්නේ කියලා ඔයා හිතලා බලන්න. ඇයි මේක allow කරලා නැත්තේ කියලා ඔයා කල්පනා කරලා බලන්න. හැම එකටම reason එකක් තියෙනවා. හරි. හැම එකටම reason එකක් තියෙනවා. හරි. reason එකක් නැති දෙයක් කරන්නේ නැහැ civilized මිනිස්සු. reason නැති වැඩ කරන්නේ primitive මිනිස්සු, ප්‍රාථමික මිනිස්සු, ගෝත්‍රික මිනිස්සු. මම දන්නවා ඔයගොල්ලෝ සීසන් එක දේවල් ඕන තරම් කරනවා කියලා නේද? ඔයගොල්ලෝ කේන්දර ඉවසන් යනවා, පිළිම වලට වඳිනවා, හරි? ඒ ඇවිල්ලා ගෝත්‍රික මිනිස්සු කරපු දේවල්. මේ හැම එකටම රීසන් එකක් තියෙනවා. ගෝත්‍රික මිනිස්සු රීසන් හොයන්න කම්මැලි. හරි? මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ කොහොමද රීසන් නැති දේවල් කරනවනේ. සිවිලයිස් මිනිස්සු රීසන් එකක් නැති දෙයක් කිව්ව ගමන් මල පයින්නවා. හරි? ඇයි හොයන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. Right? So everything has a reason. Think about this. Why this is not allowed? You will find the answer. Okay. If you can't find it, do Google search. Right. If still you can't find it, you can always ask. Right. You can always ask. Okay. Right. So this is not allowed. This is not overloading. Okay. Okay. So let's move on. So not only the methods, you can overload constructors as well. Right? You can overload constructors as well. That means you can have multiple constructors as long as the signature is different. Now you can see this one has no arguments. This one has a constructor with one string. This one is a constructor with a string and integer. Likewise, then depending on the way you are calling, it will call the correct constructor. Right? So let's do it as a example. So I have only one constructor here right now, right? Uh, that is no argument constructor, so I can have another constructor. Overloading is available, possible. But now it is compiler because both have the same signature, so I can have something like string, let's say ACC num, account number, right? String ACC num. Now two constructors, this is overloaded constructor. And now of course what I can do is, remember මං constructor එකට access තියෙනවා කාටද? Instance variable වලට. ඔක්කොම දැන් එකට ඔලුවට එන්න ඕන. ඉතින් constructor එකට access කරන්න පුළුවන් static variable, instance variable. constructor එකට ඕන instance method, static method call කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් access තියෙනවනේ. මට පුළුවන් ඕනනම් කියන්න. ඒකද account එක create වෙන එකදී මට කියන්න පුළුවන් මෙන්න මේ instance variable එක acc num equal මෙන්න මේ acc num කියලා. හැබැයි එහෙම කිව්ව ගමන් confuse එකක් වෙනවා. දෙකම acc num මම කොහොමද instance variable prefer කරන්න පුළුවන් කිව්වා නම නොකිය. නමුත් මේවයි confusion එකක් තියෙනකොට හැමතිස්සෙම කියන්න ඕන this dot කියලා prefer කරන්න ඕන. නැත්නම් එයා දන්නේ නැහැ මේ acc නම් කියන්නේ මේ පැරාමීටර් එකටද මේකටද කියලා. ඇත්තටම එයා හිතන්නේ acc නම් කියන්නේ පැරාමීටර් එකට කියලා. හරි. ඔන්න ඔය වගේ තැන් වල තමයි අනිවාර්යෙන් this කියන keyword එක use කරන්න වෙන්නේ. මේ පැරාමීටර් එකේ නමයි instance variable එකේ නමයි දෙකම සමාන වෙනවා. හරි. දැන් මට ඒ වගේ කරන්න ඕනුන්නේ නැහැ නේ මෙතන. හරි. මෙතන මට sorry මෙතනදී ඕනුන්නේ නැහැ කොහොමත්. හරි. මොකද මෙතන පැරාමීටර් reference variable sorry මෙතන දැන් මේ පැරාමීටර් එකක් තියුන්නේ නැහැ නේ balance කියලා. මට මෙතන this කියන එක optional. this කියන එක optional. මට ඕන නම් ලියන්න පුළුවන් ඕන නොලියන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් මේ වගේ තැන්වල this කියන එක දැම්මේ නැත්නම් ඇත්තටම මට කම්පයිලර් එක සෙට් නැහැ. නමුත් ඇත්තටම account number සෙට් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද ආ parameter කියන value එක parameter එකට තමයි සෙට් කරන්නේ. so now මතකද අපි account හදලා ඉවර වෙලා පස්සේ account number එක සෙට් කරා. මට ඕන නම් දැන් මේකෙදි දෙවෙනි construct එක call කරන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. එහෙම කරාම මට ආයි වෙනම සෙට් කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. වෙනම සෙට් කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. මොකද මම මේ construct එකේදී මේක සෙට් කරනවානේ. හරි. ඔන්න දැන් මම මෙයා පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ no argument construct එක. මෙයා පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ overload කරපු string argument construct එක. හරි. ඒකත් දැන් මට මෙහෙම set කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. the account 002 set වෙනවාද කියලා මට බලා ගන්න පුළුවන්. මේ මේවා වදින්න ඕන. හරි. බලමු වදිනවද කියලා. So still it's getting run. Right. So let's see. So you can see 002 is printed by we are calling the second constructor. Right. We control click කරොත් එහමට යන්න පුළුවන්. control ඔබලා click කරන්න. You can see it is calling this. Right. So there we are setting that to the variable. Right. Okay, instance variable. So that is constructor overloading. Right. So constructor overloading is also possible just like method overloading. So the correct constructor will be called depending on the number of parameters and the data type. Right. Then the concept of local variables. So the local variables means we discussed this under methods also, structured programming. So local variables are the variables that you can declare inside your instance method or class methods. Right. දැන් අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ instance method class method. මොකද අපි structured programming නෙමෙයි කරන්නේ. ඉතින් හැමතිස්සෙම ලස්සන වචන පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. නිකම් method කියන්නේ. right. method එකක් ඇතුලේ instance method එකක් හරි static method එකක් හරි ඇතුලේ අපිට variable එකක් declare කරොත් අපි එකට කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? local variable එකක් කියලා. So that is called a local variable. So that variable has the scope is only within that method. Right. You can use it within that method, but once the method call is returned or the end of the method is reached, this variable is no longer there. But if of course you can use it inside the method. Okay. So that is called local variable. Right. Local variable. So there is a small concept related to local variables. That is, for example, if you have an instance variable, the initialization is automatic. For example, if you have not set the balance, initially it will be 0, right? But if you take a local variable, unless you initialize, you are not going to get a value. So that is a very important thing, right? For example, I will write a method here, say greetings, right? Say I have, just to demonstrate, uh, say int x. If I try to, now remember, instance variable get the default value, but if I try to print this, so those are tricky things. මම කන්නේ ස්ටඩි කරනකොට වැදගත් concepts ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන, tricky තැන් වෙනම ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන. විශේෂයෙන් examiners ලා හරි කැමති මේ tricky තැන් check කරන්න. Tricky තැන් check කරන්න. Now you can say this is, there's a compiler. You can see there's a compiler, red මේ හැමතැනම red වෙලා තියෙන්නේ, මෙත් red වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. So so that means local variables do not get the default values, whereas instance variables, class variables get the default value. That is for whole number 0, decimal number 0.0, boolean false, etc. But local variables, you don't get the default value. You must initialize whatever. If it is 0 also, you have to write it like 0, right? So that is another very important concept. Local variables do not get the initializing is not done for the local variables, right? Again, think about it, why they are not allowing it. Actually, I can't find a very good reason, right? So but if you are curious, right, think about it, why they are not allowing, not doing that, right, in Java, right? Okay, so that is local variables. Then the behavior of a reference variable that we want to discuss, right? So I want to complete this because this is very critical topic, right? That is why I ask all my project students, semester 3 students, if they want, they can join here, because, and next one is optional actually, for PhD. If you are doing the actually next one also, it's better for them to have, right, next session also, then you have very good understanding. Of course, semester 1 student, you need this to build up your other knowledge, future knowledge, right? Okay, now let's see how these reference variables are behaving, right? Reference variables are behaving. So that is another very important thing, right? So this is very critical thing I'm going to explain. Actually, what I can do is, we will explain this in the next topic, next session, because it will take some time when we are discussing the inheritance and polymorphism. I will explain this. Okay, I will explain this together with this association, composition, aggregation, inheritance also. We'll take that to the next session. So today we are going to then stop at this point, because I don't want to give a lot of things and overload your mind. Right, so I have just did the basics. I hope you got it, right? If you have any questions, very important, clarify those, right? So don't clarify or don't collect, right, things that you don't understand. හරි, ඊට වැඩි හොඳයි ගෙම්බෝ එකතු කරන්න, ගැරන්ටි එකතු කරන්න, නොතේන දේවල් එකතු කරන්න එපා. ඔයාගේ නයි මල්ලේ තියෙන අන්තිමට නොතේන දේවල්, BIT නයි මල්ලේ තියෙන. හරි, BIT මල්ලේ තියෙන්න ඕන තේරෙන දේවල්, confidence එක. හරි. So anyway, so if you have any questions, raise those things in the WhatsApp group. We will have the next session maybe few days time. So we'll finish the session doing the inheritance, polymorphism and other concepts there. Okay, thank you.